We will continue to support sustainable peace, democracy and good governance in the Gambia, President Buhari assures President Barrow.
That leadership role was very important, not for Gambia alone, but for Africa.
Police in Benue arrest more than 90 suspects as stakeholders sue for peace in the state.
Former President Obasanjo canvassed support to stop human trafficking.
50% of our governors performing, then Nigeria will be on the way to what God has created it to be.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we focus on the agenda for the National Assembly in 2018.
Now, for 19 days, Nigerian legislators, of course, at the national level, were on break for Christmas and New Year celebrations. Now, that's a development that gave many of them the opportunity to return to their constituencies, meet with their constituents, appraise the past year, and plan for this year. Of course, it's come already.
That's right. Now, it could be said that it was more of a working break by many of the legislators, as several committees embarked on oversight visits to MDAs, that's ministries, departments and agencies of government. The lawmakers also hosted some other MDAs to ascertain the level of implementation of the 2017 budget preparatory to the 2018 budget defense.
Indeed, Kingsley, many of the standing and few other committees returned to, of course, hold investigative public hearings and special meetings, of course, like the one by the Joint House and Senate Committee on Petroleum Downstream as an intervention into the fuel scarcity that almost marred the end-of-year festivities.
Well, it was also a period that several issues required the attention of the lawmakers, since, according to some experts, waiting for those issues to be resolved upon their resumption from break might be indeed rather late. Besides, some of the committees had to beat deadlines since the legislature was expected to commence more serious work on the 2018 appropriation bill presented by the president in November last year.
Indeed, Kingsley, that could be also the reason, you know, if I remember, both chambers approved the medium-term expenditure framework, of course, just in last month, that's in December, and, you know, few weeks after the president presented the 2018 budget, and then referred the estimates to the Committee on Appropriation and the various committees for further legislative action.
Now, while the appropriation bill could be the most important, as it were, that is currently before the National Assembly, and this is due to the fact that virtually everything is tied to it, from social, political, and economic matters, there are other equally important issues that need the urgent attention of the federal lawmakers. All
right, now, from deliberations in both chambers when the legislators resumed plenary yesterday, that's Tuesday, it was evident that the National Assembly has its job cut out now. Insecurity occasioned by killings, an age-old farmers' herder conflict, which has assumed a new dimension. There's also the oil scarcity, which we all know is still biting hard in some parts of the country. We also have passage of all important bills. Of course, these have been identified to be necessary. For instance, in different sectors, transportation, we also have the ease of doing business and constitutional amendments, all sum up to make the year a very crucial one for the legislature.
Now, the fact that the general elections will be holding early next year, that is in February next year, 13 months from now, with a timetable already released by the Independent National Electoral Commission, providing the timelines for activities that will lead up to the elections. It also means that a lot of political alignments and strategies will obviously reach the peak in the course of 2018. And as a major democratic institution, the legislature will also be at the center of all of these activities in the build-up to the 2019 general elections.
Indeed, Kingsley. Now, let's, of course, get some very rhetorical questions. What should the National Assembly pay more attention to in this year? How soon will the 2018 budget be passed? Finance, having received the proposal earlier than before. Now, will the National Assembly extend the implementation of the 2017 budget before passing the 2018 appropriation bill? Again, what will the National Assembly do to address the insecurity? Will constitution amendment be effected in this year? Will campaigns for general elections affect the performance of the National Assembly? And again, Kingsley talking about the fuel situation that has brought, of course, untold hardship to millions of Nigerians. Will the passage of the PIB be seen this year? Questions, questions, and questions.
Of course, these are the issues that we shall be asking our guests to respond to in the discussion segment of the program later on Good Morning Nigeria. My name is Kingsley Osadolo, and I welcome you to today's broadcast, which is reaching you as always on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. It's a live broadcast.
I am Claire Dilabo Abdul Razak. We'll appreciate you as always. And in the course of our program, we will bring you this newspaper review, business, sports, foreign, arts and entertainment. But of course, as we always do here on this program, we'll take our news first. And today we'll be having Kene Emma Agodike with us. Kene, good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning, Clay and Kingsley. Welcome to the news. President Muhammadu Buhari has described as unfortunate that he and other ECOWAS leaders had to use what he calls strong-arm tactics to get former President Yahya Jammeh out of office. Receiving President Adama Barrow on a thank-you visit, the president promised Nigeria's continued support towards sustainable peace, democracy and good governance in the Gambia.
In that closed-door meeting, he made one statement that changed everything. That if the Gambian president wants to challenge the sub-region, he is welcome. This was his words, and that made a big difference as a leader. And that leadership role was very important, not for Gambia alone, but for Africa, because the problem was an African problem, and the solution was an African solution.
We did our best at the most critical time. What follows now, I think the president will tell his team, and then we will raise a corresponding team. They will sit together and see how we can draw a practical program, how we can complement each other's efforts for development.
In continuation of his genuine efforts at finding lasting solutions to the challenges of security in parts of the country, President Muhammadu Buhari this Tuesday held a crucial meeting with the entire principal officers of the Senate. The meeting behind closed doors was a follow-up to the one earlier held on Sunday with the presiding officers of the National Assembly. The Senate President, Bukola Saraki, told newsmen after the meeting that fruitful discussions were held in the overall interest of the country.
Well, just a follow-up. You know, I was here with the Speaker, was it 2 nights ago? And today was our first day of the session. And if you followed, we debated the issue of the unfortunate incident in Benue for the whole day, from about close to almost about 4 hours. And some of the resolutions we took there was for me to personally come and brief the president on some of our resolutions, particularly the issue of security. So I was just here to brief him on the debate and some of the conclusions we reached.
How did you receive it?
Very well. We hope that we begin to see results of some of the actions, bring normalcy back to Benue. Not only Benue, also other states too, that we're seeing a high incidence of this kind of violence and killings, that there's need for us to address some of these issues and restore confidence back to the people.
Resumption of plenary at the Senate was dominated by security issues across the country. National Assembly correspondent Dennis Adeguloye reports that the ad hoc committee report on the review of security infrastructure in Nigeria following the emergency visit to Benue State was deliberated upon. The Senate President, on behalf of the Senate, also condoled with the governor and people of Benue State.
It is the responsibility of the Senate to ensure that appropriate legislative and executive and legislative actions are put in place to promote safety and security for all the communities in Benue and Nigeria as a whole.
The security personnel did inform the committee clearly that those harboring foreign armed bandits are known. And they have in fact compiled that list and sent to Abuja.
We all condemn these killings in the strongest terms, and we declare that mindless bloodletting has no place in our society.
Still with the National Assembly, the House of Representatives has condemned the killings in some states, especially the recent one that left many dead in Benue State. This was contained in the welcome speech of Speaker Yakubu Dogara as members reconvened for plenary after the Christmas and New Year break. The Speaker also called on government at all levels to apply stiffer sanctions on any erring public servant, especially those charged with the responsibility of protecting lives. The House observed a minute's silence in honor of the dead.
Honorable colleagues, we are all painfully aware of the wave of murders of innocent Nigerians that has been sweeping through the nation, from the senseless killings in Rivers State to the killing rampages in Benue, Taraba, Kaduna, Zamfara, Adama, Edo, and other states. Their countries now being painted red with the blood of the innocents on account of unrelating bedlam, callously promoted by cold-hearted merchants of death. On behalf of the House of Representatives, I wish to convey our heartfelt condolences to the governments, people, and especially families of those who have lost loved ones in these primitive, mindless, and despicable rounds of bloodletting across our dear country.
Moving on, following relative calm in the troubled areas, various stakeholders and religious leaders in Benue State have continued to sue for peace and unity among people of the state. They made the appeal during a meeting held in Makudi.
All these rumors that are circulating that there is a crisis between Muslim and Christian in Benue State, we are showing the whole world that is a lie.
We are all Muslim and Christian. And then we know this both religion, they are calling on worshipping one God.
And I also advise parents to caution their younger ones not to take laws in their hand. We are law-abiding citizens in Benue State.
We are not done with Benue State, as the police command there says it has so far arrested more than 90 persons in connection with the crisis that erupted in some parts of Makudi, the state capital. Police Public Relations Officer Joel Yamu, while parading 42 of the suspects, assured that the law will take its natural course.
The charges is principally for public inciting disturbance, mischief by fire, because there are about 2 houses were burnt.
Meanwhile, former President Chief Olusegun Obasanjo is canvassing more support from federal government to stem the tide of human trafficking in the country, with particular reference to Edo State. Chief Obasanjo made a plea when he paid a visit to Governor Godwin Obaseki in Benin.
When I was dealing with that in the past, it was mainly young girls from this state. But now I understand that young men have also been added, which is rather unfortunate. The governor is going places, is doing everything. If we have 50% of our governors performing, then Nigeria will be on the way to what God has created it to be.
And that's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Claire and Kingsley after the break.
All right, welcome back. Now it's time for us to take a look at some business stories. Now, experts are projecting that 2018 has bright prospects for the economy if peace continues to reign in the Niger Delta region. Plus, federal government of Nigeria pays 11 billion naira to UWIN awardees. Let's join our correspondent Joy Uzo for details of these stories.
Hello and a warm welcome to Business News. New data from the National Bureau of Statistics on Nigeria's inflation rate indicate that inflation has further dropped to 15.37% in December 2017 from 15.90% recorded in November of the same year. According to the Bureau, the Consumer Price Index, CPI, which measures inflation, ended 0.53 percentage points lower than the rate recorded in November. The report stated that it became 11 consecutive disinflation in headline year-on-year inflation since January 2017. According to the report, increases were recorded in all classification of individual consumption by purpose divisions that yield the headline index. And on the nation's economic outlook for 2018, an economic expert and Director General, Abuja Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Chijioke Ikechukwu, has expressed optimism that the year holds high positive indicators for the Nigerian economy. The remarkable increase in the price of crude oil lately, the analysts say, is playing a huge role in increasing the revenue base of the nation, since Nigeria is still largely dependent on oil.
The economic outlook looks very bright. It looks very bright because our major revenue major revenue base is growing every day. At an international oil price of about $70 per barrel, our revenue is increasing. Don't forget that around the 30th of November, OPEC countries and Russia decided to continue with their production cuts up to this 2018. And that has actually limited the production output of various OPEC countries. And when that happens, prices of oil will continue to go up. And if that has happened, it is a good thing for us because Nigeria depends heavily on oil for its revenue. And because this is so, all the things that have set us back in the past are again coming back to life, on the condition that the militancy will not come back again within the year.
The Nigerian equities market maintains uptrend as the NSE All-Share Index inches up further by 2.17% to close at 44,054.72 basis points, as against 0.51% appreciation recorded previously. Next is a graphic summary. And finally, on business news, the federal government has disbursed the total sum of 10.995 billion naira to the beneficiaries of the third edition of the UWIN program from 2015 to date, out of which over 8.3 billion naira was disbursed by the President Muhammadu Buhari-led administration. The Minister of Finance, Mrs. Kemi Adeosun, disclosed this while releasing the last payment of 125.640 million naira for disbursement to the final 61 beneficiaries of the third edition of the program. In a statement signed by the Director of Information, Salisu Nambata, the amount was disbursed to 1,500 beneficiaries who have started or expanded their business across a variety of sectors, including information and communication technology, ICT, manufacturing, services, and agricultural production and processing. That's business news. Many thanks for watching.
That was Joy also on Business News. We're moving on now, and newspaper review is next.
Bayo Toby, our newspaper reviewer, is here with us for the review session today. Bayo, good morning and welcome to the program.
Thank you, Kinsley. Good morning. Good morning, Claire. And good morning, Nigeria.
All right. Let's begin. The stories, of course, that you can expect to see on the front pages these days will include stories on security issues, particularly matters arising from what happened in Benue State. Now, that's the lead story for this day newspaper, and it comes with a double-decker headline and 2 riders. Senate gives Inspector General of Police 14 days to arrest perpetrators of Benue killings. It says House of Reps, wants state of emergency declared on insecurity and may summon Buhari. Saraki, others meet with President on crisis. That's the lead story for this day newspaper. Now, a variant of it is also there as a lead story for the Blueprint newspaper. Now, Blueprint has it this way. It says Catholic bishops reject cattle colonies and say another civil war looms. That story is in greater detail on page 6. There are other headlines, of course, still on the front pages of the paper. For instance, that's for the Blueprint now. Above that lead story, but below the nameplate, says we are running military democracy. That's according to B.C. Akonde, one of the chieftains of the APC. That story is on page 41.
All right, let's take a look at, of course, just to follow up for what Kinsley has said. Daily Sun also talks about the issues in Benue and other parts of the country. Its headline reads like this: Herdsmen's massacre, get Benue killers. Senate gives IGP 2 weeks ultimatum. The details of that you can find on pages 6 and 39. I don't think I have that story on any of the other papers I have here. No, I don't have it. But Bayo, I think we should...
Yes, well, the National Assembly resumed the plenary yesterday, and the Senate President immediately cautioned all political actors in the executive and the legislature that they should not be distracted from the purpose for which they were elected, that is governance, and be distracted to the 2019 campaign. You know, since the INEC released the timetable of 2019, all politicians have been tempted to be looking forward to 2019. Meanwhile, the Senate considered the report of its committee that visited Benue, and they gave directives. The Inspector General of Police has been given 14 days to apprehend the perpetrators. Furthermore, they have called on the security to increase their presence in the areas affected, and the Senate is considering a national security summit so that they will consider violence to the extent to which it is threatening national security, cohesion, and survival. The Senate President made a clarification. I said, this is a wake-up call for the executive and the legislature. The President must act, and those responsible must be held accountable. At the House of Representatives, the Speaker also did not mince words. He said there are no sanctuaries for killers and hardened criminals who feed on human blood. He says that the responsibility to end the killing lies with the government, and they must live up to their bidding by providing security for lives and property. However, he also used the occasion to talk about the concerns that they will protect Nigerians, particularly the issues that have surfaced with the petrol crisis. He said the House of Rep would find to the root cause of what he described as subsidy. Meanwhile,
just before you leave that issue, Bayo, sorry, I didn't say this on time. Nigerian pilot, has the caption. It's the lead story. Nationwide insecurity. All is not well with Nigeria. That's, of course, coming from the Speaker of the House of Representatives. Then, just the rider there says, Ekweremadu canvasses state of emergency in Benue State and others. So,
well, that's part of the debate at the House of or the Senate, and also the pronouncement by the Speaker in the House of Representatives. But meanwhile, the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Nigeria, as Kinsley read earlier on, has said federal government should shelve the idea of introducing grazing colonies. It says the statement by the conference said a better alternative to grazing colonies should be encouraged, and he said they say it is the establishment of ranches. However, in a related development, a presidential spokesman has said that respected religious leaders should stick to religious duties and leave politics to politicians. Special Assistant to Media on the President, Garba Shehu, was reacting to a statement credited to Secretary General of the Christian Association of Nigeria, Musa Asaki, while he was passing judgment on the constitutionality of some of the actions that the president has taken. He said there has never been any occasion where the president has violated the constitution. Meanwhile, killings in Benue had raised tempers, but we are, thanks to God, the emotions are beginning to get tampered with now. Overtures are being made to overcome the heightened emotions. Governor Samuel Utom says he accepts the apologies of his compatriot governor of brother of Plateau State. In the same vein, he has also tendered apologies to his brother governor of Nasarawa State for the statement he made in the heat of the. So this is the beginning.
Yeah, Bayo, that's very significant. What the governor of Benue did. That's to say, Governor Lalong. Yeah, he came out to apologize. Yeah, that's Plateau. That's he apologized to Autumn, and then Autumn, of course, in return accepted his apology, and then he followed up by sending a delegation on a condolence visit to Benue. I don't know how many other delegations have gone to Benue on a condolence visit. Instead, you know, some persons have tended to posture. But what Lalong has done, I think, is quite statesmanly, and that should be commended, along with Autumn as well. Let's take other headlines now. Blueprint newspaper, still, we return to the front page of Blueprint newspaper. Fuel scarcity man-made, that's according to Saraki, Senate President. It's too early for 2019 politicking. Well, the early birds in these things. And then 9 billion naira arrears. Retirees threaten to occupy Ayade's office. That's on page 14. Peace Corps prescription order are still in force. That's attributed to the police. And then reps probe missing $44 million at NIA. And Boko Haram leader Shekau mocks Chibok girls' parents. That's on page 41. That story with regard to the $44 million belonging to the NIA, that's the National Intelligence Agency, that's the so-called Osborne cash haul. It's also there on the front page of this day newspaper. It comes down there, just the bottom half of this day. It says, why ONSA, that's to say why the Office of a National Security Advisor ordered movement of $44 million belonging to NIA to safety and has to probe removal of funds from agency's vault.
All right, I have two very important stories on the front page of the Leadership. I'll take the lead story on the front page of Leadership, also coming out from yesterday's resumption of legislators. Senate to make budget non-implementation impeachable offense. Senate to make budget non-implementation impeachable offense. You can find that on page 6. It comes with two riders. Planned imposition of sanction unrealistic. That's again coming from the presidency. Now, federal government releases 1.2 trillion naira to finance capital projects. Now, that's the lead story on the front page. But just a little below the nameplates there, you will find another story, and it says inflation rate declines to 15.37% in 2017. And this is coming from the National Bureau of Statistics, NBS. Bio.
Well, before we go to the economic story, let's quickly look at some political story. A former interim chairman of APC says that the presidential system we are running can no longer sustain the growth and success of Nigeria. He suggests that a multi-party parliamentary democracy system be resorted to. He cited the example of the success in the United Kingdom and India. However, I think the challenge is not with the system, but the challenge is with the way we are running the system. In the sense that you hear our distinguished senators and members of House of Reps stand in our National Assembly and say, this parliament, they are running a presidential system with the mentality of 1966. They talk about opposition in the presidential system where they are supposed to be talking about multi-partisanship or bipartisanship. In a presidential system, it is how you operate the system to achieve success, not by talking about opposition that does not exist in the presidential system. Well, it is part of the debate, but coming to the inflation, again, it's a mixed grill here. It is encouraging to hear that inflation is dropping. It used to be about 15.9 0%. It's now 15.37. It's dropped to 15.37%, right? But the snag from what the National Bureau of Statistics released is that the reduction is only in the rural areas. In the rural areas, it was 16.27%. It's now 16.27%. It was 16.92%. But in the urban area, it's still high. So instead of reducing in the urban area, it is very high. That is why people in the cities are still complaining about high cost of foodstuffs.
That's right. That's of course, that figure, that 15.37%, that general figure is for the month of December. Yes. December 2017. By the way, that's the editorial for the New Telegraph is one that we don't have the time to take now, but it's there on page 15 of the paper. It says, sports in a loaded and challenging new year, all kinds of events that are due up this year. Commonwealth Games, they have
World Cup.
FIFA World Cup.
Yeah, in fact, 2 women cups.
Yes,
there's
right.
under 20, under 17.
Payo, see you again tomorrow.
Tomorrow is another day. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll be dealing with our principal item for discussion. All right, you're welcome back. And if you just tuned in, it's Good Morning Nigeria that you're watching live on the network service of the NTA. Now, Salihu Abdullahi, our correspondent, has put together a background report as a stage setting for our discussion this morning.
The 8th National Assembly kicked off its activities on discordant note due to the circumstances that led to the emergence of presiding officers. Despite shaky and turbulent start, both the Senate and the House of Representatives have enjoyed a stable leadership structure within the past 2 years of its inauguration. Nigerians, therefore, expect that the National Assembly will align its legislative agenda within 4 years in line with the present administration, which promised change. The citizens expect to see a government that will evolve and be more responsive to their needs and expectations, with the legislature playing a strategic role in sustaining democracy and improving the welfare of Nigerians. Like its preceding legislature, the 8th Assembly drew up a legislative agenda that seeks to address poverty, reduce unemployment, tackle insecurity, and challenges related to the environment. Emphasis was also on blocking wastages in governance, entrench probity, accountability, and transparency. Above all is ensuring timely delivery and passage of bills, as well as budgetary processes in order to address non-implementation of budgets and abandonment of projects. So far, all these programs have received legislative attention at both the upper and lower chambers. But whether they met the expectations and yearnings of the electorate is another ballgame altogether. Bills have been passed and oversight functions performed. With a year and a half to the end of the tenure of the 8th Assembly, the year 2018 is considered crucial for the legislators to make or mar the social, political, and economic well-being of the nation. First, the legislators have the passage of the 2018 budget to contend with. The excuse of late presentation may not hold water this time around as it was earlier than before. Constitution amendment and passage of the Petroleum Industry Bill are other issues that the National Assembly is expected to address in 2018. While all these are being contemplated upon, the age-long farmers-herders conflict has escalated beyond what has ever been seen before. This is in addition to the heightened insecurity in all parts of the country, leading to the deployment of soldiers in about 26 states. As one of the tripods in the democratic system, the legislature must play its role effectively and efficiently for the country to achieve her goals of ensuring peaceful coexistence, economic development, and good governance. What should the National Assembly do in 2018? How should it go about it? Who should the National Assembly account to? These are some of the issues experts will discuss shortly on Good Morning Nigeria.
That was Salihu Abdullahi with a background report. And we have our guest here in the studio, Senator Aliu Sabi Abdullahi is Chairman, Senate Committee on Media and Public Affairs. He was with us 2 days ago on this program. Thank you very much for joining us for this discussion.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Good morning, Nigerians.
We also have here with us Sezen Wanwagu, Chairman, Partners for Electoral Reforms. Mr. Wanwagu is, of course, it's a familiar face on Good Morning Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Nice to be here.
All right.
All right, gentlemen, again, we were discussing the agenda for the legislature, that's this time the National Assembly in 2018. First, there's a clear recognition that the National Assembly, that's to say the legislature, has its own calendar, which doesn't synchronize with our January to December. That's where we are now. Of course, you are into your third session of the 8th Assembly. Well, regardless, Nigerians, of course, want to have a sense of precisely what to expect from the National Assembly, considering the range of issues that are live currently: security, energy, security as well, security for life and property, security for energy sources, including the greater issue of marching on to the 2019 general elections. But let's begin with the distinguished Senator Sabi Abdullahi, who is spokesperson for the Senate. What is it in the focus of the National Assembly, in this case the Senate, that captures, if you like, the essence of Nigerians at Nigeria in the year 2018?
Well, thank you very much, Kingsley. First, let me say that for us in the National Assembly and the 8th Senate in particular, from beginning we had a legislative agenda. And that legislative agenda is very, very clear, very precise, and actually falls within the context of all the issues that today we are looking at as a nation. It is very clear that good governance is a top priority, because most of the crisis we are seeing is actually a fallout of bad governance. If our institutions were working as they should be, if everybody who has a responsibility is living up to that responsibility, some of the issues we are seeing today could not have been happening. But be that as it may, let me say that we have resolved, as always, to be very, very sensitive to the yearnings and aspirations of those who sent us to the National Assembly. And to that effect, we have all sworn to defend the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And in particular, if you look at Section 14, subsection 2B, which says the welfare and security of the citizens is the primary purpose of governance. So whatever we do, we must anchor all our interventions along that line. The moment the welfare and security of our citizens is threatened, then we know we have work in our hand. And I think that explains why, though we are on recess, when the issue of the fuel subsidy was looming, the Senate leadership directed the committee under Senator Kabiru Marafa to cut their recess and come back. And we did that. The same thing when these Benue killings came on board. The ad hoc committee, which we had earlier set up, because the events leading up to the setting up of that ad hoc committee is instructive here, because this was another sad event that happened in Zamfara, and Senator Tijani Kaura provided, he gave us information through a motion. And looking at the fact that at that time, we have considered more than 7 motions coming from different senators from Kaduna South, for example, from Edo, from Enugu, and other parts, Benue, and Plateau, Nasarawa, and even Taraba. So the Senate that very day said, look, let's look at the totality of the security challenges. And that was what led to the ad hoc committee under the Senate leader. So they were directed to go to Benue, which they did. And of course, yesterday, they gave us insight. First, we had an executive session. And the whole beauty of democracy is consensus building and understanding. And I think when we had that executive session, it was for us to understand raw and bear the key issues so that we can understand the expectation Nigerians have on us. And I think that is where we got it right, because we were able to build consensus around the fact that the issue is not tribal, the issue is not religious, it is a Nigerian problem, and it is something that all of us must rise up above whatever primordial loyalty or sentiment that we are associated with, to know that it is happening in Benue State this time around, it has happened in Zamfara, it has happened in Kaduna, it has happened in Edo, it has happened in Enugu, it has happened in Taraba, and so which state is next? So to that extent, we were able to now consider the entirety of the result. And yesterday, if you look at it, we're supposed to close by 2. But because we were determined to allow every single senator who is representing different parts of the country to come out with whatever his own perspective is, for us to have a consensus, we had to suspend our rules to go beyond the normal time we normally, and we took it up to 4 o'clock.
Okay,
so we're able to
distinguished Senator, fine, you've gone, into great details, but again, let's take it step by step. First, let me commend your very luxurious display of the Nigerian attire. That's quite good. You have told us about the excuse me, legislative calendar, but when the assembly resumed yesterday, the Senate President, of course, gave his opening speech, and he itemized, some of the areas, that were, critical. And he did say that, look, we must put our eyes, I'm trying to quote him now, on the big picture. Might that give us an insight into the order of, importance of the issues that the National Assembly will focus this year, and what might be the big picture he's talking about?
Well, the big picture is Nigeria. The big picture is the unity of Nigeria. The big picture is that whatever happens to one Nigeria in any corner of Nigeria is affecting all of us. When you kill one Nigeria, you have killed all of us. That is the big picture the Senate President is drawing our attention to. That as statesmen, we must rise up to the occasion and know that yes, like he said, a wake-up call. We must rise up to the challenge because Nigerians are tired of some of these crises and problems all over. Whatever big plan we have to bring progress and development, the moment there is no peace, the moment there is mistrust, the moment people look at each other with suspicion, I think the veritable environment for that progress to happen has been compromised. And I think that is the big picture that we as Senate, we are called upon by the Senate President to look at, so that in our contributions and in our decision making, we will begin to see that Nigeria is our primary focus, and we must protect the integrity, the unity, and therefore the peace that should pervade Nigeria if anything must happen.
All right, Senator Sabi Abdullahi, thank you very much. Again, we come back to you in the course of the conversation. President Wago, of course, we introduced you a familiar face on Good Morning Nigeria. Before we get into prescriptions of what the National Assembly should do, can we take a step back and say in the past 2.5 years or more, what is it that we have seen that has taken us to this stage where we are now, virtually in the election season?
Well, thank you. For me, I think what we need to shift away from is our sense of ad hocism. Perhaps most of what we deal with are things that are already so known, They have been with us. If you take the herdsmen crisis, for instance, you will appreciate that up to about even 2011 and even before then, that challenge has been there. And so we need to have a more sustained, a more nuanced, approach to engaging issues. And there is no institution of government that is equipped, that ordinarily should be equipped to elevate conversations from the low level of conversation we get around the parliament is very well much resourced to be able to take us to that nuanced conversation. But we see this scattershot approach to everything, and it's not just in the parliament, it's a Nigerian thing. When it comes, we pretend that it is just coming and we want to deal with it and get it by, and then when the next one comes, we come again. So my sense is that the Senate has been able to, in time past, you know, pull Nigeria out of the precipice. You can take the doctrine of necessity, for instance. The country was at that point. It took the National Assembly to waging. And the expectation of Nigerians is that if you are that well-resourced, if you have that capacity, we are not seeing this go to Benue, travel to Benue, come back and say, it is not helping the issue. So the next time any other thing happens, we go back to that place, we come back with another. Let's have a sustained engagement in terms of dealing with the challenges that we face.
What are those challenges in your opinion?
The big issues, they are coming out clear. You mentioned them. Security is one of the, and it's not just, see, just cast your mind back to 2014. If you remember, we embassy security men, not even security men. Official reports put it about 60 trained people were brutally murdered, burnt to cold ashes. We moved on. We moved on. Benue that we are talking about, Agatu has been in the news since 2016. We moved on. When are we going to have leadership that will say, look, can we have a multi-stakeholder engagement around these issues that can bring a closure? We don't ever bring a closure to anything. That's one. Then on the issue of, for me, there are 4 things that I think the National Assembly should confront very quickly.
Okay. Okay, before, okay, go ahead, please.
Okay, I've talked about security. I think that we're in the election season, or the season of politics has been forced on us by the release of the timetable. I don't know to what extent there's a legislative support for the kind of amendments that will be required in terms of new issues that are emerging, and I think that the National Assembly will need to expedite action. We've seen a situation in which we amended the Electoral Act, not knowing that some of the things we amended were already, you know, captured in previous amendments. We need to take a holistic look as we go into the election and see what new things we can bring to bear. Corruption is a strong issue in terms of, first and foremost, perception, and then in terms of how it is being engaged currently, especially within the government, internal government circles itself. There is a need for the legislature, National Assembly, to bring supportive, some of those sunshine anti-corruption laws that are before it, that have been going from one legislative year to another. You take the whistleblowers bill, you take some of those bills that are already there. We need to see an expedited action on supporting. Then we need to see some movement away from the politics around the leadership, the appointment of leadership of the anti-corruption agencies. You cannot sustain the argument that the EFCC is in acting capacity, that the ICPC, as we speak, is in acting capacity, and these very strong institutions of the fight against anti-corruption, you really, in acting capacity, there's a slow movement in that environment. The National Assembly should push that forward. Then we're going to be approaching census. This whole idea about what is our number, every time we bandy 180 uninterrogated figures, Chidi Odikalu said we don't ever count anything. The National Assembly should come out in very clear terms and give the support that is necessary to be able to give us the data that we can work with as a country. Right. And the National Population Commission will need to do that collaboration effectively.
All right.
Just before you take on the next question, the census was scheduled for 2018. But we've had on several occasions on this program the head of the National Population Commission, and it was clear from 2016 that this year wasn't going to be feasible for the census.
All right, Kingsley, let's welcome in Professor Femi Otubanjo. He's joined us from our Ibadan Network Center. Professor Otubanjo is of the Department of Political Science, University of Ibadan. Prof, thank you very much for joining us. Now, your entry question from me is probably give us an overview, your own impression. Did the 8th Assembly last year work to add value to the lives of Nigerians? Did they work to prevent, for instance, some of the issues that are becoming very critical today, issues of security today, fuel scarcity, and all other challenges?
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me. I was going to my first instinct is to ask what happened in 2017. Did anything of significance happen through the agenda of 2017? I'm happy one of the contributors talked about security and welfare as the primary purpose of the legislature in accordance with the Nigerian Constitution. How much of it did the National Assembly promote? The 2017 was a very poor year for security, kidnapping, terrorism, harassment, and so many other things. It was a poor year for welfare. Of course, everybody knows that the economy was poor and people, there was an expansion of poverty to even the middle class. Now, my worry about the National Assembly is that people come in year out declaring that they have done this, done that. What is important in legislature is impact. It is not the drama of making laws or making or passing bills. We have to, what is the impact? What has been the impact of the legislature on the Nigerian situation? Many people don't view the legislature with any positive sense. They don't see the legislature as being part of the solution to their problems. The legislature is supposed to be focused primarily on the budget. Most legislators, legislative houses in the world, their primary purpose is the budget, because everything that we do has to do with money, with appropriation. How much impact have they had on the budget? We have their history of padding, and we do not know, and only recently when the 2018 budget was being presented, there was some worry that the 2017 budget had only been implemented up to 30%. What have they done about that? They are just going to pass another budget that will not be implemented so far as their own constituency allowances are paid. So we have a legislature that I personally don't think very highly of, because its impact on the Nigerian situation is almost unnoticeable. We see them, they go to places, somebody is talking about shifting, sitting from 2 to 4, as if that was a major sacrifice. That is not what we are looking for. We are looking for the results of what they are doing. What Nigeria has become today, with the way the legislature has been behaving, the government itself, is that our democracy has become a government of the people, for the people, by the people in government. It is the people in government that are enjoying our democracy. The legislature, the National Assembly, has done nothing to change that.
Professor Femi Otunbanjo, thank you very much. Let's give Senator Sabia Abdullahi the opportunity to respond to what you have said with regard, of course, to impact assessment of the exertions of the National Assembly.
Well, thank you very much. I've listened to Prof. And the sense of conclusion I have is that that is the major reason why Nigeria has a lot of problems. Because he's a professor, and I believe for him to come to national TV and say the National Assembly has done nothing, that's an absolute statement. And I'm sure he does not have all the facts. But be that as it may, let me say that I have integrity. My colleagues, the 108 senators, have integrity. We serve this country in various capacities before we came into the Senate. The Senate is an institution of democracy, and it will outlive every single one of us. I'm a Nigerian. I'm proud to be one, and I do and carry out my responsibility with pride, believing that no matter how little I make my contribution, it is the little contribution by every single one of us in the positive that will move Nigeria forward. The National Assembly is just one out of the many components that should be carrying out its responsibility. But be that as it may, let me make one point clear. He is saying the National Assembly primarily should be about budgeting. I say no to that. The Constitution is very clear. The duties of the National Assembly is lawmaking, legislation, number one. Number two, representation. Number 3, oversight. And oversight here is over governance. And I will take each and every one here and give you insight into where we have intervened legislatively to make sure there is impact. Number 1, we knew by 2016 Nigeria was in a recession. Where did we get that information? It was on the floor of the National Assembly where the Minister of Finance, when we resumed from recess early last year, and we said, look, the crisis we have seen is so much, please come and tell us what is the state of economy. And she said, technically, Nigeria is in a recession because we've now had 2 quarter-to-quarter negative growth. And as a result of that, we went into a very robust decision, a debate, where we came up with issues and made 22 recommendations. And as a result of that, the, executive were advised accordingly, and they began to take measures. The critical element in our recommendation was the fact that there is no synergy and complementarity between the fiscal and the monetary policies. And because of our intervention, they were able to come together so that we worked. Now, as a result of this, last year, all of us said we've exited recession. And of course, the National Bureau of Statistics has shown that there is a forward-looking outlook for the Nigerian economy. This cannot just be by accident. We made a lot of contribution to that. Now, the ease of doing business, for the first time in our history, we were able to move 40 points in the ranking of nations in the ease of doing business. How did that come about? We had the National Assembly Business Environment Roundtable where we brought in various stakeholders. He talked about multi-stakeholder approach. That is what the National Assembly is doing, because we bring in the civil society, the professional groups, and all other critical stakeholders in discussions pertaining any subject matter. As a result of that, we identified 64 laws that we believe we must take actions on. And we just did not identify them, we categorized them into high priority, medium priority, and low priority, and accordingly began to work on them. As a result, today, as at last year, the, this asset registry was now having a law, and then they created the collateral registry. And then the credit bureau. All these laws came on board, and those people who are impacted by it are out there making positive gains, because as at last year, over 392 billion worth of assets have been registered on that collateral registry. So you can't sit somewhere without facts. You are entitled to your opinion, but you are not entitled to your facts, because facts are facts. And I believe the National Assembly has made this tremendous contribution in this regard. Now, when it comes to representation, we are representing the Nigerian people. For example, sometimes in 2016, the issue of JAMB was facing a lot of Nigerian families. A child sits for JAMB, he's frustrated, he's not getting admission, and then next year he has to sit. Maybe by that 3rd year, he's not getting admission, he's frustrated. We have passed a law to say that, look, JAMB, you have to allow some 2 years for that person to still use his result, because it's not his fault that he's not getting admission. These are all representative interventions we have made, because we believe, as representative of the people, whatever pains some people are facing, we must begin to look at it.
All right, Senator.
So I think I can go on and on.
Yes,
because
Senator Abdullahi, well, thanks. Of course, we have the opportunity again to speak to some of the things that the Senate has done. But let's, Professor Femi Otubanjo, in the light of some of the points articulated by Senator Sabi Abdullahi, would you like to revise your position, or you are sticking to your guns?
I never said at any point that the National Assembly has done nothing. I never said that. It is impossible for me to say it. So I didn't say that. What I did say was that they are low on impact. Look, we are in a comparative world. Trump, as hideous as he may appear, has just got the American Congress to pass a tax bill. Obama got the American Congress to pass an Obamacare bill. Those things were of massive impact to the American people. Today, the American numbers, economic numbers, are up in the air. They are going up because of the consequences of legislative action. What I have said is that there's high drama, there's high activity in Nigerian Senate and Nigerian National Assembly but there's very little impact on the people. That you can talk about the ease of doing business. As we speak, how easy it is. You can talk about representation, how easy it is to access a member of the National Assembly, in spite of the pretense that they have constituency offices. So I am not saying that you are not doing, sometimes you dance on the same spot. You are doing things that are not massively impacting the Nigerian people. That's the point I made. I know you go to the office every day. People go to the office every day, and sometimes nothing comes out of it. You represent people, but what is the percentage of people who need your services that you represent? We have this problem in Nigeria of getting to our leaders, and that is also true of the National Assembly. So I'm not dismissing, I'm saying we need to have a different approach to this agenda. We must begin to look at how much we can influence the system, how much we can reduce poverty, how much we can help to reduce the tensions in the land. Those are the things that, that's what I said. So your distinguished senator should not be upset. Of course, it is our business as the people being represented to upset you. But I did not say that you are doing nothing. And please let me say very quickly, before I'm misrepresented, that I'm formerly of the University of Ibadan. I retired from the University of Ibadan, not there. Thank you.
Right, Prof, thank you for the corrections, and I'm sure that the distinguished senator has also noted your points. But he did also say that you have right to your own opinion and all that. But Mr. Zenwa, you've listened to distinguished senators remarks and Prof. With respect to impact and representation, how do you assess the laws, over 140 laws or bills passed, or laws passed by the National Assembly in 2017?
My quick sense is to say that sometimes when we show a mirror, you may not really like what you see in the mirror. But the truth of the matter is that public perception about the National Assembly collectively is at very low ebb. And it has very deep reputational challenge that it needs to work on. The pretense to the contrary that it does not exist, because really, and the excuse always is that, oh, parliaments are not loved, or not loved all over the world and all of that. But the truth of the matter is that when distinguished senator talked about, so I have integrity, that is also an absolute statement, because not many, even in the previous work that many of your colleagues did, some of them have no reason actually to be in the National Assembly today. And it is a well-known fact to most Nigerians. In terms of impact, what Nigerians want to see is not just, because government is a collective, really. So if there is hunger, the National Assembly says, oh, we've passed 140 bills. The average Nigerian wants to situate how those 140 bills impact on his daily existential questions. And that is not happening today. That's the truth. So whether it is a failure of oversight is something we need to interrogate. How much oversight is being brought to bear on the institutions of government that has responsibility to make life meaningful for the people? We are doing a social, what's it now? We are doing all sorts of social safety nets. Most of those social safety engagements are ambushed across the country. The expectation is that the representatives of the people have responsibility to intervene. You hear N-Power has given this number of people jobs. In many of the states, there are governors who have already given appointment letters to people when N-Power itself has not issued any letter. And it is in public space. We expect that the representatives of people will intervene, because that is what affects majority of Nigerians. So without prejudice to the excellent work going on, there are issues that border on the well-being. The issue of corruption, like I talked about, we need to be able to see how many of those real laws that have been, whether the executive bill or they are the ones that are coming from you, that have been passed in this legislative year. Many of them were carried over. And we're going to see a situation in which we come to the end of this legislative calendar as well, and most of those laws will not be passed. So we want to see people in jail. The real issue that faces us is that there are no convictions. So we need to tweak the law that makes it difficult for us to have people who have put their hands in the public till to go to jail. That's not happening. Many Nigerians want to see that happen. So it's for the prof just simply reflects what a lot of people think. In terms of access to the legislature, I saw you nodding and saying it's easy. The truth is that security challenges that we face has made it difficult to access the National Assembly. That's number one. Most of the legislators themselves run away from their constituents, not in terms of the quick fire brigade visits that they do, and this whole campaign about, oh, when you come, they bring their needs and you can't meet all of those needs, and the constituency offices are not functioning. Many of them are not functioning. And it's not your problem alone, even those of us in civil society, when you have offices outside of, the states. When you are not there, the people you put there don't go there. And you have no way of knowing that they will not be there. So we need to tweak some of these things and make the work that we do more impactful to our citizens. I don't think it's a broad side from the professor. It's simply to show you a mirror of what the people think. You may be thinking otherwise, but the truth of the matter is that if you ask the average, if we do a vox populi right now along the road, you may be shocked that majority of Nigerians are even calling that you need to scrap what they call National Assembly. That is a strong issue that is on.
All right, Mecca. Sorry, Wango. Well, it's not what they call. That's what we have. It's the National Assembly. It's a creature of law. Gentlemen, we'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll continue with the conversation.
All right, you are still on to Good Morning Nigeria. If you've just joined us, we are looking at, of course, after resumption of a plenary or legislative calendar by the National Assembly, what is next? And we've got guests here. Emek Ezenwanwagu is with us. We have Prof. Otubanjo from Ibadan Network Center, and we have the spokesperson, of course, of the Senate, National Assembly. Now, distinguished Senator Sahabi, if you look at the budget implementation from 2016, 2017, well, 2016 was far better than what we had in terms of implementation than 2017. 2017 was below average of going by various analysis. Now, do you think that is a fault of oversight function of the National Assembly in 2017?
Well, first, before I go into that, I think the last two speakers have made some very points, and I think it's important I also give one or two insight. For us in the National Assembly, we are not unmindful of the fact that people feel differently about the National Assembly. In a democracy where freedom of speech is guaranteed and where people are free to express their opinion, we know this is true. But let me say that as the face of democracy, the National Assembly remains the most important institution that the people must support to understand how they work and what they are expected to do. In many instances, let me say that there are things that are being ascribed to the National Assembly that truly the National Assembly does not have the legal power to do those things. And I give you a classical example. When things go wrong, people say the National Assembly. When we discuss and we make recommendation to the executive, and the executive is not taking action, the people do not rise up to impress it upon the executive that yes, our representatives have spoken based on facts and robust discussion that they have had. And we've had several resolutions.
For instance?
For example, let me say that we have made recommendations having to do with some institutions, for example. What happened to those recommendations? Nothing happened to them. So for us, what I'm trying to say in essence is that we do our work and get up to the gate where we are supposed to be. And beyond that, the Constitution does not empower us to go any further.
Can you be a bit more specific on the recommendations and the institutions? What recommendations?
Okay, for example, I can't remember a very clear case now, but let me use the present situations we are having with respect to the Benue killings, for example. When we had our discussions yesterday, the leadership was now asked to go back and brief Mr. President on all the recommendations we've had. And we had a lot of recommendations. For example, earlier on he was talking about ad hoc nature of things. And I agree with him. And that is why the National Assembly is saying, this time around, the Senate is saying, we want to move away from all these ad hoc things. And in one of the recommendations or observations we made, for example, it says, the committee observed that there has been various support of panels and committees over the years whose recommendations were never implemented. This contributed to the failure of government to nip the problem in the bud until it attained the present disastrous. So we are saying this time around that we want to convene this National Security Summit. And the whole idea is to bring the whole gamut of all of these things together. Fortunately, Senator Yahya Abdullahi from Kebbi State, who was a retired permanent secretary, has been involved in various police panels and committees that have been set up while he was in service. And he's actually a member of this committee on security. So what we are trying to do now is to see how we can bring all of this together. Now, the best we can...
Sorry, you talked about earlier recommendations made and that were not implemented.
Yes.
Yes, and I said, can you give us example of those that you have made to the executive that has not been implemented, that Nigerians need to react?
Okay, for example, you see, let me remember the case of the import waivers, for example. There were a number of recommendations we have made under import waivers, where as a result of oversight, we realized that the country was losing over 400 and something billion as a result of the issue of around import waivers. I can't remember the specific recommendations, but there are recommendations we have made. And the extent to which these are being implemented, nobody follow up. Like he said, when the issue come on board and we all get around it, immediately another issue come up, we forget about that, and then we move on. So I'm saying we have several resolutions made by the National Assembly on several issues. And most of these recommendations, some are followed through, some are not followed through.
All right.
I think that's the point I'm trying to make.
Senator, one point that it's also in the public domain, one that Wangu has already indicated. We have seen the non-confirmation of nominees for various positions. So these are persons appointed, nominated by the president. When are we likely to see a resolution of whatever rift there is between the executive and the Senate in this time around with regard to confirmation hearings?
Well, let me say the issue is not before the Senate. The issue is right on the doorstep of the executive because they are the ones who said we do not have the powers to do confirmation. We rejected Magu twice, and they said we don't have the powers to, do confirmation. So the issue is not before the Senate. The issue is right on the doorstep of the executive.
So, but what has been
because they are the ones who came out to say we do not have those powers, and so the Senate is saying that since you say we don't have those powers, then we will not be wasting our energy. Let's look at other issues, and that's what we are doing. Various committees are doing their work, and we as a Senate, we are also doing our work.
Thanks a lot. Let's return to Professor Femi Otubanjo at our Ibadan Network Studios. Professor Otubanjo, what do you make of this in terms of the non-consideration of presidential nominees for appointments? I mean, just listened again to Senator Sabi Abdullahi saying that, look, this is certainly no fault of ours. It's the executive that has caused all of this. How do they heal this rift between the two arms of government?
That the government says or has said that the Senate has no powers to confirm. They have simply brought out the EFCC Act, and there appears to be some contradictions in the Act with the provisions of the Constitution. And we've always advised them, go to the Supreme Court. So there's no reason why, I think it's the executive that should have approached the Supreme Court for an interpretation. There's some conflict there, and it has to be resolved through judicial intervention. But that's not to say that it's a blanket state exclusion. Nobody has excluded the Senate. It's a constitutional responsibility And because they are calling on EFCC does not mean they should not do other institutions. I think we have to grow up and say because the executive has insulted us in one instance, we are not going to do our work in other instances. There's a dispute about the EFCC, please, but there's no dispute about other confirmations. So they should put the EFCC confirmation on one side and go ahead. There's ICPC. There are others that are waiting that are not in dispute. So I don't see that the civil senator has made the right point on this matter.
Let's move on to another issue. This time it has to do with the election timetable, which INEC has already released. Incidentally, we had the INEC spokesperson, that's the Director of Voter Education and Publicity, and his opinion was quite clear that the INEC has worked at the moment within the ambit of the law, namely the Electoral Act 2010 as amended, plus the Constitution. And yet, Professor Otubanjo, we know that the National Assembly has also made some consequential amendments to the 1999 Constitution, as previously amended 3 times. And then you have the amendments now going through the rounds of the various state houses of assembly. What do you think that we need to do? Assuming there are, again, consequential changes arising from the constitutional amendment process, as well as amendment of the Electoral Act, assuming the National Assembly gets around to doing that, what do we need to do in terms of getting our scheduling right so that persons do not take off now believing that what INEC has done in terms of releasing a timetable or schedule of activities is the right way to go, only to be hamstrung going forward by new legislation?
What INEC is an institution that has the capacity to adjust itself to realities. The amendments that have been done by the National Assembly will take some time to go through the state houses of assembly. INEC cannot operate on the basis of putative actions. They cannot operate on the basis of expectation that some things will change. They have to operate on the basis of harsh reality, and they have done so. So we, hopefully, I do not myself see that those amendments will be relevant in the immediate. And so I am optimistic that the INEC program will be the one that will prevail. But should there be the unusual and the amendments come true, I imagine that INEC will have to adjust it. We've had a situation in which we even postponed the elections, the 2015 elections. So there's nothing sacrosanct about any date. It must be subsumed under the realities that we have. So I don't think we should be really worried about the relationship between INEC timetable and the amendments of the National Assembly. I think that at one point, either the National Assembly's amendment will not be ready in good time for it to be relevant to the 2019 elections, or INEC will have to adjust its program if there are any significant changes arising from the National amendments from the National Assembly.
All right, Prof, thank you. We have another guest joining us for this discussion as we stroll down to the conclusion part. Chairman, Rules and Business of the House of Representatives, Oka Jerk. Thank you very much for joining us for this conversation.
It's a pleasure having me.
All right. In addition to your opening remarks about, of course, the National Assembly, this is the probably last productive year before the electionary period sets in. What would be the high points from the National House of Representatives?
Well, thank you. At the beginning of the 8th Assembly, the Speaker, who had drafted what he called the legislative agenda, what he intended to lead the House to accomplish in the 4 years of the 8th Assembly, on the resumption of the House, the Speaker was elected and he presented that to the House. It was debated aggressively and adopted as resolution of the House. Part of it, for instance, was that all extant laws would be reviewed with a view to updating them in tandem with modern realities. He put together a committee of leading lawyers and civil society organization activists, and they identified about, well, over 300 laws were identified. And in an unprecedented manner, on a single day, over 100 bills were read for the first time in the House of Representatives. And subsequently, all the 300 were read on the floor. And they cover diverse areas of our national life. And that has been going on. The House has done, again, in unprecedented fashion, passed, as we speak, about 147 laws, bills into law. Now, I may not have the statistics before me now, but those laws, apart from those ones that I'm talking about, reforming the extant laws, new laws that have been identified, because the legislative agenda which I spoke about identified key areas of our national life which the House intended to tackle. And so these laws are in various stages of completion, apart from the 147 that I spoke about.
But we have critical issues right now. Yeah, and as I said earlier, this is the last productive year. You know, if you put that in mind, is there a need to, rejig the items on the legislative calendar from the House perspective? Are there critical areas that you want to quickly address before electioneering period sets in?
Definitely, the laws which we are handling, the bills which are handling, they are not just done in a random fashion. They have been prioritized. The economic bills were prioritized between, and because of the cooperation that goes on between the House and the Senate. If we pass, we send to the Senate, and my colleague from the Senate will sit and try to prioritize, depending on how the Senate has seen it, and on our side we do it, and we cooperate to ensure that those that are coming have been passed from the Senate side and passed to us. We give it priority over any other bills that have been passed from the Senate, and vice versa. So there is that cooperation that has been going on. It's not as if we are doing it in a random fashion.
Yes. All right, Honorable Okajeb, thanks a lot. But you hadn't joined us by the time Professor Femi Otubanjo was talking about high drama, high activity, but low impact in terms of the exactions of the National Assembly. Can we narrow this down? My colleague Claire was talking about current exigencies, for instance. These are what you will call, novus actus interveniens. Kidnapping is still very rife in the country. We've seen the spate of insecurity and the wanton bloodletting in different parts of the country. All of this cannot be going on, and then the very lofty ideas that you've talked about in terms of what you are doing will still gain traction. How is the House, for instance, responding to all of some of the current exigencies that the country is currently facing?
Okay, so for instance, last year by June, based on a resolution passed by the House on the spate of kidnappings across the country, all the security chiefs in the country were called to a closed-door meetings, and it was very exhaustive, more than 4 hours of in-house deliberations, and they mapped out their strategies for trying to bring down the rate of kidnappings across the country. Well, what happened after that? But the House did its part, and they had, in fact, beautifully lined up what they called the strategies for trying to curtail kidnappings. We came back, we came back from the break facing the same challenges. My home state of Benue, it's an open secret that over 70 persons were buried in one day, and this is not restricted to Benue. Several other places are facing the same security challenges. Yesterday, expectedly, the issue dominated the proceedings of the House of Representatives, and a resolution was passed to set up another committee to interface again with the security agencies. By the way, the Speaker had informed the House that himself and the Senate President were called to the villa, and the strategies for trying to combat the present security challenges were lined up before them. But we had to do our duty. The resolution was taken, and another committee was put in place, which will try to liaise with the security chiefs and find a lasting solution to this issue. And let's not forget that the legislature has its own limitations. We can only draw attention, do what is needful, and the rest, in terms of implementation, comes from the executive side of the divide.
All right, Honorable Okajeb, thanks a lot. We'll come back to you,
You know, Kingsley,
in the course of the conversation, Claire.
Sorry,
yes.
I get the impression that when these laws or bills are passed into laws, the members of the legislature just sit back and then say, okay, it's not our duty to get it implemented or follow up.
No, well, not necessarily.
I don't know.
I don't think so. Where the two lawmakers are shaking their heads in disagreement.
If I may correct that impression, part of the legislative agenda that we gave for ourselves was to step up the process of oversight and to ensure that the laws that have been passed by the legislature are implemented by the decent. So part of it, and we've been doing that aggressively. I mean, that may even account for why even the budget will not be passed as expeditiously as the executive had wished, or even the Nigerian public may wish, because we really had to do the needful. So ensuring that the laws are implemented is part of the legislative agenda of the House, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think, sorry please, let's get one thing very clear. We know when it comes to oversight, we have a very strong responsibility here. And I would say that our leaders have always told us that, look, our failure of oversight as legislature over the years has also given way to some of the problems. Now, I believe in every sane situation, if you even admit your own weakness, then you have also prepared yourself to address those weaknesses. And arising from this, I will tell you that is why during the recess, you could see committees being asked to cut their recess and come back to come and do, because that is oversight. And I will tell you that in doing this oversight, all committees, there is a timetable, for example, in the Senate, where based on the time frame you have been given, reminders are sent to the committees to make sure that you bring up your report for deliberation, so that when we deliberate, we can pass a resolution. Now, I will tell you, many committees, even during the holidays, have been working. Because, like he said, the issues are multifaceted. It's not one thing leads to the other. If there is poor economic, he talked about poverty earlier. He talked about unemployment earlier. So if our economic policies and our economic laws are being, abused, then you will definitely begin to see a manifestation of all of these things. And I think this is where
Distinguished Senator and Honorable Member, let's look at, and then of course the other two guests, Owango and Professor Femi Otubanjo in Ibadan. Let's look at one practical issue with regard to impact.
Yeah.
There is probably no year since 1999, probably, of course, for several decades, that Nigeria has witnessed, say, 80% of the implementation of its national budget.
Yeah.
80%. I mean, it's 70% will give you an A. I mean, Professor Otumbajo is 70% is 5.0 if you have a 5 if you have a 5-point scale. Perhaps we haven't seen 70%. What has the National Assembly, in the course of its oversight, identified as the causative factors for the dismal budgetary implementation year in, year out? And how did the findings of the National Assembly therefore now impact on its evaluation, assessment, and passage of subsequent appropriation bills? Because we keep seeing what year on, year out, and then somebody will come. We have had guests here on this program say, oh, budgets are mere estimates. If it's a mere estimate, why bother yourself putting the figures together? Senator Sabi.
Well, I think when we say budget are mere estimate, that is estimate as presented and laid before the joint sitting of the National Assembly.
Yeah, but that's actually a little bit the real substance of my question.
But then after that, the National Assembly is now expected to get down to work to look at exactly the interpretation of government policy as reflected in the various, votes or various lines of budget implementation. Now, what I will say here is that as a National Assembly, when we engage the MDAs in budget defense, each committee, this is what they look out for. Government is saying this is what you want to do. And we are not seeing it reflective in terms of the allocation of resources to some of these things that you said you are going to do. And I will tell you, as a National Assembly, for example, under the 2016 budget and 2017 budget, we know security is a major concern. And so when we come to look at the submissions that have to do with security organizations we have modulated. And I remember 2016 and even 2017 budget, we've had costs to increase the funding that goes to the military as a result of the various issues that they are having, and even the police, because we are saying you have expounded and presented your policy intention. That intention should now be translated into the allocations that you have made. So these are the areas where the National Assembly intervenes. But unfortunately also, we are faced with this situation where somebody sees what the National Assembly is doing in some of these adjustments as budget padding. And that's why I maintained, in the course of our work, there is nothing called budget padding. It is our duty to make sure that when the executive brings their budget, we know where the problems are as representative of the people. And we have said, look, your budget is not reflecting the reality of issues that you should solve. For example, the social intervention.
Distinguished, we will please plead with you to be, very brief, because we're rounding up this conversation.
So for me, I think the bottom line is that we look at the critical intentions of government and try to match them across the various MDAs as proposed by the executive. And where we feel that enough has not been provided to the MDAs, it is the duty of the National Assembly to make sure that the needful is done, so that those various agencies are properly funded to take care of the issues on the ground.
Yes, Senator Sabi, let SN1
keep calling here.
Maybe we'll rename you Emeka. SN1 go. Take it from this perspective. Look, you keep hearing, and this is not a new thing. It's been going on over the years. They say they make a budget to say on a certain benchmark, and then you have over and above that in terms of excess, and then they have an excess school account, money is lodged there, and then you have all kinds of agencies declaring how much they have raked in terms of revenue, and yet, in terms of budgetary implementation, we don't get 70%. I doubt if there are MDAs across board that receive up to 75 or 80% of their budgetary allocation, perhaps excluding the security and intelligence agencies. That's the core of my question.
I got your question. I think that one of the things that we wouldn't necessarily have to be doing is to do a textbook engagement of our National Assembly, how the National Assembly should work ordinarily. But how does the Nigerians see the National Assembly? Except we really deal with that, we will not be able to. First is that the failure of oversight has something to do with some ethical issues that the National Assembly has not been able to deal with in terms of its hand in gloves with the MDAs in such a manner that has not brought that perception for Nigerians that they can really oversight the MDAs in a very responsible manner. If you talk to the MDs, the DGs of most of these MDAs privately, you will see a scant regard for members of the National Assembly in terms of the way they perceive them, in terms of the way they approach issues privately with them. And we need to put that on the front burner. If you want to have respect, if you want to be able to command the kind of respect that the members of the National Assembly will demand, they need to up the ethical game in terms of how they engage. That's very important. And it is not an umbrage on the National Assembly, but many people perceive that what you call oversight is oversighting to their pockets.
Okay.
I need to conclude on that. And then I think really that we need to get out from rituals. When you have an emergency in the manner in which we have, we cannot continue to play with rituals. Oh, we have a legislative agenda. Oh, we have a limit and all of that. If you talk to EFCC, why are people not in prison? Why are people not convicted? They say, oh, we've done our work. As soon as we take the person to court, our work ends. If you talk to the National Assembly, they say, oh, once we make a resolution and we pass it to the executive, our country is in a hurry for development. And I think that everyone who is in a position of responsibility and leadership must come to terms with that reality right now. That needs to be cooperation.
Thank you. We have to pause you. We've got some tweets. Let's quickly take them. Andrew Oboro tweets. Can the senator please tell us the status of investigations on the downstream section and other investigations that have been conducted, and on why the outcomes were never released?
Festus Akimboyewa has this tweet. It says, looking at the records of the 8th National Assembly, I see 2018 as another year of rolling legislative crisis, where big ambitious pieces of legislation like the appropriation bill, minimum wage, PIB, and anti-corruption bills will take the back seat.
Now, Ibrahim told the tweet, when our National Assembly members are not accessible, how will they know the needs of their constituents and respond to them?
Mike Eko, the Senate must stop this attitude of self-adulation and listen to the complaints of Nigerians whom they claim to represent.
And Mukail tweets, Senator Abdullahi Sabi, if really senators represent Nigerians, how come the Senate turned deaf ears to the people they represent about their wages?
Andrew Ogboro tweets, please tell the senator that the JAMB resolution by the National Assembly was not accepted by the board, which means the lawmakers don't follow up on those resolutions.
Distinguished Senator, just a quick response to those two.
Well, first, let me say
that
the downstream sector investigation is still ongoing. In fact, I think next week, Thursday, there will be an investigative public hearing, which will be aired live to Nigerians. Then, with respect to wages, let me say that the National Assembly was actually in the forefront of impressing it upon the executive to make sure that they take action on the wages. On more than 2 or 3 occasions, we've had meetings with the NLC and the organized labor and other civil society organizations where the chairman of the National Assembly intervened. And I think it was as a result of that that the committee is now being set up, and we are saying that the right thing must be done. For me, I think on JAMB resolution, well, these are some of the challenges. Earlier on, I said that we pass a resolution, we try to say, look, this is what Nigerians are crying for. And when we say action should be taken on it, that sometimes we tend to get the negatives from the executive. But now that he is saying this, I think I will get back and we try to talk to the relevant chairman of the committee so that we can see where are we on this. And I'm sure we will definitely give a feedback to that.
All right, back to Professor Femi Otubanjo. Professor Otubanjo, let's get your comment. There are a number of issues on the table, whichever one you want to react to or whatever your closing thoughts might be.
Well, let me say that I'm excited about the quotation by James I, the King of England. When talking to the Parliament at that time, he said to them, I plead with you in the name of God to consider that you may be wrong. The National Assembly of Nigeria should consider that what they are doing is not very popular with Nigerians. The image of the National Assembly is that it is ineffective, it is self-serving, and it is corrupt. Part of the problem of budget implementation is what my colleague has said. The way the National Assembly oversight teams relate with those parastatals. What we have in Nigeria, as I said before, is government of the people, by the people, for the people in power. The reality is that their own budgets are fully implemented. Every year, they get their budgets. They get their allowances. It is the rest of us who get nothing, who get partly completed roads, unbuilt bridges, unequipped hospitals, and so on. If they are concerned about us, if they are committed to us, they must find a way of getting the government, the executive, to implement what they have approved in the National Assembly, or to punish the government because they are going to bring another budget, to deny the opportunity for the president to even present a new budget unless the old budget is approved up to at least 70%. You can't have a new budget when you have not that 30%. What happened to the appropriated money? So really, they should be thinking of their image. They should in fact, do a wholesale assessment of themselves. This is an opportunity. What are we doing wrong? Why do people perceive us so negatively? How can we change this perception? Because that perception is there. And however aggressive anybody can be in denying it, it is true that Nigerians don't think highly of the National Assembly.
Professor Femi Otubanjo, the Professor of Political Science, of course, formerly of University of Ibadan. We'd like to thank you for joining us from our Ibadan Network Center, sir.
Thank you very much for having me. Have a good day.
We don't have much time, Kingsley. I
just wanted Honorable Jeff to respond very briefly now. One of the tweets, Festus Akimboyewa says that, look, what to look forward to is another year of rolling legislative crisis.
Well, let me hurriedly say on the issue of implementation of budget before implementation of budget, whether the National Assembly, even with the best of oversight ability, the National Assembly still could be hamstrung when they go for oversight and you are told that where there are no releases for this quarter or what quarter. So what do you oversight? I mean, there has to be releases for implementation, or rather oversight to take place. Talking about crisis, you see, we are a collection of politicians there, and I think personally I'm bound by the perception of the public about how we operate. I would really love to know how the public perceives us, so that if there's anything we can do internally to correct it, we should. But unfortunately, some of these perceptions are not borne exactly by the reality on the ground. But it's okay. As politicians and as representatives, the feedback process is good for trying to correct as internal mechanisms of the processes in the National Assembly.
All right. Honorable Okajev, Chairman, Rules and Business Committee of the House of Representatives, we'd like to appreciate your being with us on the program this morning.
It's been a pleasure.
And Claire, you signed off Senator Sabi, but the one point that remains on the table is as follows. Honorable Jeff referred to that. If there are no releases, why are there no releases? What did you interrogate to find out? Honorable Sabi Abdullahi, that's the chair of the Senate Committee on Media and Public Affairs. Thank you very much for being part of our discussion this morning.
Well, thank you for rolling along with us.
All right. We also no, NTA is not rolling. NTA is cruising. As one go, always a delight having you on the program. Chairman, Partners for Electoral Reforms.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for being here today. Okay, so let's take our complimentary segments now. Let's go over to the foreign scene.
Abdul Razak, as always, you can watch a repeat broadcast. We always do at 5 minutes past 5 on channel 101 Start Time, NTA News 24. From all of us here, bye-bye.